evening, you're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Wynna Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Hong Kong's daily caseload remains in 4 digits, while authorities offer in-home vaccinations for the elderly and the disabled. The flight data recorder of the crashed China Eastern airliner has been recovered. And Joe Biden calls Vladimir Putin a butcher as Russia ramps up attacks on western Ukraine. The hospital authority is no longer asking people to stay away from emergency rooms after waiting times have decreased in recent days. The improvement comes as Hong Kong registered around 8,000 daily infections. Maisie Mock reports.
There were another 8,037 COVID infections, the second day in a row that the daily uptick remained in 4 digits. Over half were detected through self-administered rapid antigen tests.
咁等候嘅時間都短咗。
Hospital Authority Chief Manager Larry Lee said while demand for accident and emergency services remained high, waiting times have shortened. In a change of tone, he urged people to visit an emergency ward if they have shortness of breath, continuous high fever, cramps, or even their faces turn blue, which is a sign of hypoxia. One of the latest COVID-related deaths involves a 57-year-old man who was admitted to Kwong Wah Hospital last Monday with stomach ache and lack of energy. He had a history of high blood pressure and diabetes. He remained stable after being transferred to Queen Elizabeth Hospital on Wednesday, but suffered a cardiac arrest yesterday and passed away. Another 151 deaths, including 21 backlog cases, have pushed the 5th wave tally past 7,000. On a separate note, authorities have found that less than half of COVID-linked deaths could be attributed to the virus. Citing an analysis, Hospital Authority Chief Executive Tony Ko said on a television interview that only around 40% of fatalities were directly linked to COVID. Another 30 to 40% may or may not have a direct relationship with the virus, while the remaining cases could not be determined. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The government is making another push to vaccinate the elderly and the disabled. Outreach teams will start making home visits this week to administer COVID jabs in separate trial programs. Here's Maisie Mock again.
With just over 71% of people aged 70 or above vaccinated and 57% for those above 80, the government is now focusing its resources to get the elderly jabbed. In a trial scheme, authorities will start looking for unvaccinated residents who are 70 or above, handicapped, or suffer mobility issues when conducting building lockdowns. A medical team will then offer to visit their homes the next day to administer the shots, provided they test negative during the lockdown. Civil Service Secretary Patrick Nip, who is in charge of the city's vaccination program, said the trial scheme could be expanded to cover more targeted groups in the future. The goal, he said, is to bring the 2-dose vaccination rates past 90% by the end of April, up from the current 84%. Apart from approaching unvaccinated individuals through lockdowns, an online platform will also launch this week for people to sign up for the in-home vaccination service. But only community groups will have access to the platform in the initial stage, but it could be rolled out to the wider public later. Nip hoped that through the outreach programs, the government can maximize the inoculation capacity. While up to 100,000 shots can be administered each day, less than 60,000 doses were taken up daily over the past week. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The chief executive denied bowing to pressure after relaxing a circuit breaker mechanism so that flights from a particular region will be suspended for only 7 days each time. Meanwhile, another 13 quarantine hotels will start to accommodate overseas arrivals from next month. Chloe Feng reports.
Amid growing pressure, the government has once again relaxed its inbound flight restrictions, believed to be some of the toughest in the world. With an inbound flight ban on 9 countries set to end this Friday, a circuit breaker mechanism is also adjusted so that the duration for each suspension is reduced from 14 days to 7. Chief Executive Carrie Lam denied bowing to pressure from the industry, calling the adjustment a streamlining instead. The circuit breaker will be triggered if a flight has 3 or more passengers who test positive on arrival, or if the airline does not adhere to pre-departure testing or quarantine booking rules, such as not verifying the vaccination records of passengers. Lam said the decision was made after balancing the risks and people's need to travel.
There is no room for major relaxation, but we will never be able to meet the aspirations and needs of the aviation industry in full because they are doing a business. But we are in a public health emergency. So every business has to make sacrifices. I hope and I make an appeal that airlines will also understand that we are striking a needed balance to allow some inbound flights to take place, but at the same time, we will not relax our controls in order to keep Hong Kong safe.
Cathay Pacific welcomed the announcement soon after, adding they will resume more flights. Anticipating greater demand for inbound quarantine rooms, certain hotels currently used as community isolation facilities will start accepting bookings by returning residents from next month, providing an additional 4,400 rooms. Another 3 hotels will be reserved for incoming domestic helpers, with a total of 1,600 rooms on offer. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Carrie Lam said she is happy to provide advice shall the next administration decide to conduct a review of the government's handling of the COVID pandemic. The city's leader explained now was not the time to be distracted by a large-scale investigation, but was confident the next administration will take the matter seriously. The probe can cover the communication between the medical, welfare, and public health sectors, she added, with a focus to make improvements. Lam also expressed condolences to families who have lost their relatives due to COVID. 6 days after the deadly China Eastern Airlines plane crash, authorities today confirmed that a second black box has been found. It was sent to Beijing along with the cockpit voice recorder for analysis this afternoon. Chloe Feng reports.
就在这个书本下面，我们发现了一个圆形的物体。
After a false alarm on Friday, authorities confirmed today that they had finally found the flight data recorder of the China Eastern Airlines plane that crashed nearly 1 week ago. It was dug out from a slope at around 9:30 this morning, about 1.5 meters deep in the mud and covered by a tree root, around 40 meters away from the estimated point of collision. The discovery came days after a first black box was found nearby on Wednesday. Both had been installed in the back of the Boeing 737-800 aircraft, which had been carrying 132 passengers and crew. Flight MU-5735 was heading to Guangzhou from Kunming when it nosedived into a mountain near Wuzhou City on Monday. It was confirmed last night that nobody had survived the crash, the country's worst aviation tragedy in a decade. Speaking to the press this afternoon, investigation head Zhu Tao said over 33,000 pieces of the plane have been found so far. And while the black box discovered today was severely damaged, its memory unit remains intact. Officials are hoping the two recorders can shine some light on how the collision happened. Rescue workers and victims' loved ones stood in silence for 3 minutes in a mourning ceremony today. China Eastern Airlines says it began the compensation process for families. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
Overseas now, Russia ramped up attacks on western Ukraine yesterday during U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to neighboring Poland. In an impassioned speech last night, Biden said his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, cannot remain in power. This was the scene in Lviv. It's a city in western Ukraine where Russians sent rockets slamming into an oil facility yesterday. Huge orange flames and dark smoke brought the smell of chemicals into surrounding areas. Across town, frightened residents ran for cover. Lviv had become a safe haven for some 200,000 Ukrainians fleeing their homes. It had been largely left alone throughout this month-long war. But due to the city's close proximity to Poland, many believe Moscow's sudden aggression here has something to do with a visitor just across that border. U.S. President Joe Biden, who landed in Rzeszów on Friday, was seen visiting Ukrainian refugees in Warsaw.
You're dealing every day with Vladimir Putin. I mean, look at what he's done to these people. What does it make you think? He's a butcher.
In a fiery speech later that day, Biden also said Russia's longtime leader had to go.
Putin has the gall to say he's denazifying Ukraine. It's a lie. It's just cynical. He knows that. And it's also obscene. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principles, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
The White House later clarified that Biden was not calling for a regime change in Russia. The president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia, it said. In response to Biden's speech, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told Reuters that it was not for the U.S. president to decide, adding that the president of Russia is elected by Russians. On to the weather before we go. A northeast monsoon will continue to bring cooler weather in the coming days. Cloudy with occasional showers and thunderstorms tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 17 and 20 degrees, rising to 25 on Wednesday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. And that's our main news for Sunday night. Join us for more at 11. I'm Wynna Wong. Thanks for watching. Good night.